My brother told me I was too poor to be seen at his grand wedding at the prestigious Caldera Ridge estate. He disinvited me in front of his future in-laws, mocking me like my thrift store cardigan could stain their old money photos. What he didn't know was that I owned the entire venue. So when he tried to humiliate me, the venue manager called him personally to cancel everything, and the shock on his face was worth every sleepless night I'd spent building my empire from nothing. Let me start from the beginning, because this isn't just one moment of betrayal. It's 16 years of sacrifices that apparently meant nothing when my own brother decided I wasn't sophisticated enough for his perfect day. My name is Lauren Pierce, and I'm 35 years old. Saturday night, August 24th, Westbridge, Pennsylvania. The Harringtons kept a house that looked like it had been cut from a glossy magazine. Candlelight on polished wood, curated art that dared you to breathe too close, and a dining table long enough to make anyone feel small. Daniel arrived in a navy blazer and the self-satisfied smile he wore whenever he thought life was finally arranging itself around him. Ava floated in wearing a cream cocktail dress that whispered to the designer even from across the room. I had on a charcoal cardigan and black slacks, clean lines, and quiet fabric. It was the kind of outfit that lets you listen more than you speak. Dinner moved like a show. Courses appeared, wine breathed, and small talk circled the same safe topics. When the conversation pivoted to the guest list, Daniel looked at me as if I were a checkbox he had been waiting to clear. He said we needed to be realistic about optics. He said the reception would be formal and that my presence might complicate their vision. The room held its breath. Ava pressed her napkin and murmured that she did not want me to feel out of place among patrons who discussed investments in art foundations. Her mother, Margaret, smiled the kind of smile that never reached the eyes and suggested I could still be involved by arranging simple restroom florals. She said it would be a sweet personal touch. My fork paused above the plate. I felt the words land like pebbles in deep water, soft on the surface, heavy underneath. Charles Harrington, all cufflinks and posture, added that these events require a certain fluency, and that no one wanted me to feel uncomfortable. Daniel cleared his throat and said it plainly. He said I was too poor for a Caldera Ridge crowd, and that people might talk. He said it would be best if I skipped the reception altogether. Something quiet and precise clicked into place inside me. I did not raise my voice. I did not list the balance sheets in my head, or the miles of flooring I had chosen plank by plank in rooms none of them knew existed. I set my napkin down and thanked Margaret for dinner. I told Ava the garden roses were beautiful. I told Daniel that sometimes family surprises you. He said he doubted it. In the hall, a framed photograph caught my eye. Ava and Daniel on a lookout above the river valley, wind in their hair, the world below them small and obedient. It looked like certainty. I remembered the first lease I signed at 19, a studio that smelled like old paint and determination, and how certainty never showed up before the work. I slid my cardigan on and felt the familiar weight of my choices settle across my shoulders. Not thrift. Armor. By the door, Margaret touched my arm. She said she hoped I understood that these decisions were made with care for everyone's comfort. I told her I did. She said perhaps on the day I could help direct deliveries from a back entrance so the staff would not be overwhelmed. I smiled. I said I would not be on site. Outside, late summer air pressed warm and wet against the porch. Crickets sang underneath the even tick of the Harringtons' irrigation system. I walked to my car and sat with my hands on the wheel until the porch light clicked off behind me. In the glass, I could see my reflection calm and steady. My brother had always mistaken calm for weakness. He had never looked calm, chose a course, and then refused to move. On the drive home, I replayed each line, each careful kindness that cut deeper than any insult. Too poor, out of place, restroom flowers, back row at the ceremony. The words stacked like bricks, and between them I laid the mortar of 16 years of late nights and early mornings and the quiet pride of making something that lasts. Caldera Ridge rose in my mind the way it does at dawn, stone warming from gray to gold, glass waking to sky. I thought of the staff who know me as Ms. Pierce. When paperwork needs a signature, and as nobody at all when I prefer it. I thought of the manager who trusts me to protect the brand we built with patience and cash and 1,000 inspections. I thought of the contract on Daniel's date and the clauses that exist for a reason. I reached my little townhouse near the river and let myself in. The kitchen clock hummed. I washed my hands and watched the water run clear. On the counter sat my notebook edges softened by use. I opened a clean page and wrote the date. Then I wrote a single sentence. When people tell you who they are, listen. I added a second line. When people tell you where they think you belong, remember where you actually stand. I closed the book and turned off the light. The night held still like a long-held breath. In the dark, I could already feel morning taking shape. Morning arrived like a thin line of light across the kitchen tile. Coffee steamed in a chipped blue mug that had outlived years of moves and paint splatters. I stood barefoot and listened to the old clock hum. The quiet felt earned. I let it fill the room before I opened the door to the past. My mother was named Helen, and she loved in the way women of her generation were taught to love by smoothing rough places and pretending the splinters did not exist. She bragged about my report cards, but she saved her pride for Daniel. He was the firstborn son. When he messed up, it was boys will be boys. When I succeeded, it was of course you did, dear, and can you help your brother with his application? None of it felt cruel at the moment. It was air. It was what our house breathed. In 2019, she signed a will at a fold-out table in the church basement after a free legal clinic. I remember the fluorescent lighting and the smell of paper and coffee that had burned too long. Later, she told us that Daniel would receive the larger share. She said he had a family to build and that I was so resourceful I would be fine. I was fine. I hugged her and thanked her for taking care of it. Then I drove home alone and sat in the parking lot until the engine ticked quiet, and I let myself feel the old ache without letting it turn to anger. That night I promised myself I would never measure my worth by anyone else's math. Penn State taught me how to outwork a clock. From 2008 to 2012, I carried a backpack that left a permanent crease on my right shoulder. I took morning classes, afternoon shifts at a copy shop off College Avenue, and night study on the quiet floor where the windows looked out over lights like a constellation of small lives. I learned to cook rice and eggs 3 ways, and to say no to trips I could not afford. I learned something more useful than any lecture, that discipline is a kind of shelter. Temple gave me a new language for the numbers I had already started to trust. In 2014, I finished the MBA with a single thrift store suit that I kept pressed in a garment bag and a spiral notebook full of rent comps and cap rates. I was not polished. I was persistent. That proved to be enough. In 2015, I bought a duplex for $210,000 on a street with maples that dropped leaves like red paper in October. I moved into the upstairs unit and rented the downstairs to a nurse who worked nights. On weekends, I rolled paint until my wrist shook. I learned to replace outlets without fear and tile a bath without crying. I kept a small notebook in my back pocket and wrote down every expense, every call, every lesson. I slept like a person who had finally stopped waiting for permission. The second building came after a long winter and my first exchange. I sat at a small desk and read about a section of the tax code with a funny number that could move gains into the next eras. Dress if you followed its rules like gospel. I made checklists and called attorneys who returned my calls slowly because I was young and female and decided. The third and fourth properties followed that same rhythm. Buy the worst place on the best block I could afford. Fix what mattered. Choose tenants who paid on time and waved when they passed me on the stairs. Write everything down. Along the way, I learned that privacy keeps the roof from rattling. When people do not know what you have, they cannot try to shame you with it. I let neighbors believe I was a manager. I let cousins believe I was lucky. I let Daniel believe I was busy with small things. Keeping the file drawers closed left me free to open doors that mattered. Yin on, le suk men, my grandmother would have said if she had the words for it. Peace is power. Once a broker told me I should post my portfolio on social media to build a brand. I smiled and said my brand is rent checks that clear. He laughed. I did not. I was already learning the art of silence. It made room for better choices. It made room for dignity. I rinsed my mug and set it upside down on the rack. The sun had edged higher and turned the river to a band of metal. I laced my sneakers and jogged the path beside the water, past dog walkers and strollers, and a man teaching his grandson to cast a line. Breathing even feet steady, I catalogued the small mercies of an ordinary morning. Every stride reminded me that a life is built in repetitions you choose. I had chosen to build mine on work that no one could take from me. Back home, I pulled a banker's box from the hall closet and slid it onto the table. Inside were photocopies of deeds amortization schedules and a letter I wrote to myself the day I closed on that first duplex. I unfolded it now. It said, "Keep your head down and your standards high." It said, "Never chase applause." It said, "Pay attention." I thought of my mother again and the way she had looked at Daniel across a crowded room. I thought of the will and the way it had landed in my chest like a quiet stone. I thought of last night and how the words "too poor" had skimmed across the top of my skin and then disappeared, because they did not belong anywhere inside me. The choice presented itself without drama. I could erupt, or I could align. I could beg, or I could build. I took a breath and felt something settle. I chose the only promise that I had ever held. My dignity is not for sale, not to family, not to old money smiles, not to anyone who mistakes softness for lack of strength. I slid the letter back into the box and closed the lid. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past on its way to make the morning happen for someone else. I had calls to make and a day to run. Calm does not mean passive. It means I know where I stand and I will not be moved. The iron gate lifted with a soft motor hum, and the morning guard waved me through. The sign on the brick wall read, "Mitchell Properties LLC," in brushed steel that caught the first sun. My keycard opened a glass door that still smelled faintly of new paint and lemon cleaner. Inside the lobby, plants were real watered on Thursdays, and the reception desk held a neat stack of vendor badges. I liked beginning a day with order. Order made room for mercy. In my office, the blinds were half open and the river threw light across the desk. I booted the computer and the dashboard bloomed into familiar blocks. 27 properties, 9.5 million in valuation as of last year's audit rent roll, steady delinquency near zero. My controller had left a yellow note with a smiley face that said, "The roof reserve hit the target." Clean cash flow was not an accident. It was 1,000 small choices no one applauded. I kept personal photographs in a drawer. On the wall were only maps with pins and a frame with the original LLC filing. People misread a blank wall. They see modesty and think small. I see the runway. A soft knock and Patricia stepped in with her tablet tucked to her chest. She wore black flats and a calm expression, the uniform of people who can shepherd chaos through a calendar. She gave her morning report. Weekend event teardowns, uneventful 2 vendor contracts, renewed 1 inspection at the Elm Street fourplex, complete with minor punch list. Caldera Ridge Estate operations normal. Then she paused and said there was 1 file she thought I might want to review myself. She tapped the tablet and handed me a printed packet. Caldera Ridge deserved paper. It was our crown 52 acres of hillside and lawn and stone that had been tired when I bought it and luminous when we finished. From 2020 to 2022, I had signed checks until my hand cramped. $2.5 million into structural work, historic windows kitchens that could feed a small army electrical so discreet it felt like magic. I had walked those halls before dawn, listening to the building breathe, promising it that we would not cut corners. These things can hear you when you lie. Patricia sat while I read. The packet was the wedding contract. Client names: Daniel Pierce and Ava Harrington. I traced the letters of my brother's name without letting my face change. Total package $52,000. Deposit $26,000 posted and cleared. Date Saturday the 28th of September, a fall afternoon that would make the hillsides look painted by an old hand. The sections were exactly as I had drafted them with counsel. Liquidated Damages, Section 5.4. Morals and Conduct Clause, Section 8.2. For Cause Termination, Section 9.1. Force Majeure, Section 12.3. Initials D. Pierce and A. Harrington with a tidy flourish on June 7th. Patricia noted that the timeline was on track. She said the caterer had submitted insurance the band had sent their stage plot, and the valet contractor had confirmed capacity. She did not ask about family. She never did. We kept our lanes and our promises. When she left, I set the packet on the desk and let my palms rest flat on the wood. I pictured last night at that long table, and the way the air had cooled when my brother said the quiet part out loud. I pictured the Caldera lawn at 5 p.m. in late September when the sun lays itself across the ridge like a living thing. I pictured a woman in a simple dress standing behind a hedge and deciding what mattered. I will say this now to you, and only to you. Caldera Ridge Estate is mine. The deed sits in a safe deposit box and 3 digital vaults, and the trust that holds it has my signature in ink that will outlive me. I am the owner who shows up as a consultant in jeans and no jewelry. I am the name behind the maintenance line. No one in my family knows, and they do not need to know until knowing becomes the lesson. I opened the Caldera operations binder and checked the brand policy I had written for nights just like the night we were now walking toward. It spoke about respect on our grounds. It spoke about the dignity of staff and the reputation of the house. It did not mention money because money never knows how to behave without rules. At 11, my controller came in with bank recs and a grin about a tenant who sent a thank you note with the rent. We signed off on quarterlies, discussed a refinance on a small warehouse, and laughed about the ancient copier on Maple Avenue. The ordinary moved like a steady river. Under it, a separate current gathered. Midday, I drove up to the estate and took the service road that skirts the back meadow. From the crest, you can see the ballroom windows cut clean against the sky. I stayed in the car and watched the grounds crew edge the walk where leaves would begin to fall in slow coins within weeks. I whispered a promise to the land, the same one I made the day I closed. I will protect this place. I will protect the people who work here. I will protect the name we have built. Back at the office, I slid the contract into a red folder and placed it in the drawer with other matters that required a steady hand. The room was quiet enough to hear the HVAC hum. I wrote a single line on a white notepad and underlined it once. No decisions made in anger, only decisions made in alignment. I locked the drawer and stood at the window until the light shifted. The gate outside lifted for a delivery van and settled again. The day would keep its appointments. So would I. Tuesday opened bright enough to make the lawns at the estate look pressed by a careful hand. 18 days out means walkthrough and tasting, which also means I keep a polite distance. I left my office door open, set the calendar to repel drop-ins, and let Patricia carry the ground while I carried the record. A little before 10, she checked in from the service drive. Vendors staged and steady tasting menu confirmed ballroom dressed for daylight staff in place. She spoke our shorthand that fits a busy day inside a clipboard. I told her to run the plan and ping me if anything bent. I did not mention family. The plan already knew. By 10:10, the party had arrived. Patricia's note landed like a metronome tick. Clients on site with planners. Rachel had the lead. She was the kind who brings mints for photographers and tissues for nervous parents' flats made for distance voice set to calm. Familiar faces do not guarantee an easy day. They only lower the temperature until the next draft moves through. At 10:27, Rachel asked for the VIP photo map. Routine. 10 minutes later, her thumbs outran her attention and a document flew the wrong direction. She had forwarded a short instruction from Ava that told her to keep the sister of the groom out of every VIP frame. The header carried a timestamp. The body carried a line about maintaining a refined look. Patricia flagged the message and slid it into a new folder marked Incident. I logged it from my desk and wrote the time. I did not need my name to recognize who a sister is when a plan tries to make a room smaller. One line. then the next. At 11:53, the tasting rolled from the kitchen like a rehearsal done right. Olivia Tran lifted a tray with the ease that comes from 1,000 services and set a smile within polite reach of the bride. At noon 5, Patricia recorded a reprimand at the ballroom threshold about a garnish color missing the palette. The voice carried past the sound curtain we use to keep the house bones from listening. Olivia apologized and adjusted with grace, but the words were sharp enough to turn 2 servers and drop a florist's gaze. Patricia stepped in with the tone that can put a storm in a closet. She moved the line forward and wrote the details while they were still warm. At 12:32, the seating chart came up on Rachel's tablet. She meant to send it to the Harrington group and instead nudged it back to Patricia in the thread from minutes earlier. The chart showed siblings VIP crossed out and the word overflow written where the family used to sit. A minute later, another message appeared from Margaret about optics and comfort. The corrections panel showed edit time and user tag. Rachel realized the misfire, apologized in a flurry, and resigned to the right place. Our copy was already in the file. Patricia asked if I wanted her to address house policy on respect and photo access. I told her to keep service smooth and document without debate. Our rules work best with a cool hand. We would need the full picture before anything moved. At 1:10, the tasting ended the way good service ends quietly. Rachel thanked the team. Daniel inquired about the angle of a lawn ceremony, as if angles outperform weather. Patricia answered with measured patience that makes nervous people feel capable. The group exited through the porte cochere where gravel can sound like applause to people who need it. When the last car cleared the curve, Patricia walked the ballroom, checked for left behinds, then sat down in the estate office and wrote. Her incident report read like it should. Names spelled right, times to the minute, places precise. Olivia is listed as the staff member who received the reprimand at the ballroom entry. 2 staff within earshot, 1 vendor nearby. Attachments noted. The misdirected seating chart with the edit history. The instruction that excluded the sister from VIP photos with the time-stamped header. A reference to the brand policy page on conduct and the dignity of staff. A closing line that pointed to Section 8.2 on morals and conduct and Section 9, 1 for termination for cause in the client contract. At 3:15, the compiled file traveled to my office through our system. I printed a clean set and slid it into the red folder beside the agreement. No margin notes. The paper already carried a voice built for days when people forget what they said out loud. Outside the window, the gate lifted for a vendor van and lowered again like a breath. The light moved along the floor 1 patient inch at a time. Inside, the HVAC hummed, and the printer cooled. There was no scene. There was no fight. Only the kind of receipts that do not argue, digital and dated and calm. I locked the cabinet and sat with my palms together until my pulse matched the quiet. Evidence does not ask for anger to be strong. It asks for care and time, and the discipline to let it finish telling the truth. The next step would come on its own feet tomorrow. Tonight would be simple food, watered plants, and a house that understands what silence is for. Wednesday began with the kind of gray that makes a person check the locks twice. I was at my desk before 8 notes squared, and the red folder set like a metronome at the corner. Karen stepped in with her tablet and a travel mug that could jokingly heat a driveway. She said council was clear at 9. I told her to set 3 ways. At 9, the speakerphone clicked and Ethan Brooks came on with the steady cadence of someone who reads storms in fine print. Karen stayed to run documents. I laid out the facts and left the feelings in the hall. Walk through yesterday. A directive to exclude the sister of the groom from VIP frames time-stamped and forwarded by the planner in error. A seating chart edit that moved siblings from VIP to overflow with user tag and edit time. A reprimand to a staff member in a public-facing space recorded by the house manager with names and minutes. Everything captured in our incident file. Ethan asked where the contract defined conduct. I opened Section 8. 2. Morals and conduct. He hummed a yes. He asked for the termination language. I turned to section 9.1 for cause termination and let the page lie flat. He moved to money and asked whether our damages clause read as liquidated damages rather than a penalty. Section 5.4 states the amount and the basis, I said, and both parties initiated. He asked when. June 7. He asked whether force majeure could be confused with what we were considering. Section 12.3 addresses acts outside any party's control, not behavior. He went quiet long enough for me to hear the scratch of his pen. Then he said that on these facts under sections 8.2 and 9.1, as drafted, we had a viable basis to terminate for cause and to retain the deposit under section 5.4, provided our evidence was clean and contemporaneous. He wanted 2 additions before he blessed the plan. First, a voicemail or recording where the bride or her agent directed or disparaged staff in a way that supported the pattern. Second, server or device logs, confirming origin of the exclusion directive, not only a screenshot forwarded by a planner. Karen was already moving. She pinged Patricia for any saved audio from the ballroom line or staff phones. 10 minutes later, an email landed from the estate office with a transcription note. Olivia had received a voicemail at 12:22 after the reprimand, when the party moved to the terrace. The message was brief and clipped, instructing service staff to stay out of the background of candid shots and not insert themselves into the guest experience. Patricia attached the audio and an affidavit for chain of custody. Ethan said good, that helps tone and pattern. For the logs, Karen looped in our managed IT vendor. They pulled header data from the misfire and matched it to the forward in Patricia's inbox. More importantly, they confirmed the original exclusion directive went from Ava's account to Rachel at 10:28 that morning, originating on a Harrington family device connected to the guest network. The log showed IP and time. Ethan said excellent, that ties authorship and stands taller than a screenshot. I stacked the pieces. Contract with tabs at 8.2, 9.1, 5.4, 12.3. Brand policy open to the pages on the dignity of staff and the reputation of the house. Incident report signed by Patricia with names and times. Seating chart with the edit trail. The directive to exclude with its header. Server log showing origin. Audio file and transcription. Affidavit on custody. Ethan asked about internal consistency and whether any staff had replied in a way that could be framed as provocation. Patricia reported no, and that she had already coached the team to let managers speak for the house. We turned to timing. The wedding date sat on Saturday the 28th. Ethan recommended a formal notice 12 days prior to avoid any claim of ambush and to leave room for logistics. That landed on Monday the 16th. He said to send in the morning by email to signatories and billing mirror by certified mail. Then notify vendors on a need-to-know basis after client receipt. He reminded us to keep the tone neutral and to cite sections 8.2 and 9.1 by number and title with a single sentence that the deposit is retained as agreed, liquidated damages under section 5.4. He asked me one last thing. Could I enforce the policy without mixing family with business inside the letter? Yes, I said. The file would do the talking. He said, then proceeded. He would review our draft today and return light edits, and he suggested a 9 o'clock send on the 16th to give the full day for intake. When the line went quiet, Karen sat very still, then began a checklist with the calm she saves for high ceilings and tight schedules. Draft notice with sections cited. Attach the incident packet. Append IT logs. Save the audio to the legal drive. Vendor template staged but held until after client notice. Certified labels confirmed. Calendar block set for Monday intake. I felt no heat, only alignment. I pictured the lawn in late September and the line where sun meets stone at 5 in the afternoon. I pictured Olivia's steady hands and Patricia's quiet authority and the way a house seems to listen when our voices stay even. I set the red folder in front of me and wrote the send date on a square of yellow paper. Then I let the decision sit where it belonged in structure, not in anger. Sunday morning opened clear and quiet over Westbridge. I unlocked the office while the street still belonged to the birds. The blinds lifted and a square of light slid across the conference table. Karen arrived with her hair pulled back and a stack of tabs in the red folder. On top sat the draft titled Notice of Termination for Cause. Ethan had returned it late last night with a short note that the language held. We sat side by side and read line by line. The opening paragraph identified the parties and the event date. The next cited Section 8.2 on morals and conduct and Section 9.1 for termination for cause. It stated that conduct towards staff and directives that damage brand standards trigger the owner's right to end the agreement. The following section referenced Section 5.4 and explained that the deposit is agreed liquidated damages, not a penalty, and will be retained. A closing paragraph reminded recipients that force majeure under Section 12.3 is separate and not implicated by guest behavior. The tone was steady. No heat, no flourishes. I checked the exhibits one by one. Contract copy with initials. Brand policy page flagged. Incident report signed by Patricia. Seating chart with edit history. The directive to exclude with a timestamp. System log confirming origin. Voicemail audio from Olivia with transcription. Custody statement. Karen touched each tab like counting prayer beads. Everything was where it should be. At 9:20, I called Patricia on the office line. We reviewed the protocol we had practiced for years but rarely needed. She would be the single point of contact on site. If any party called or arrived without an appointment, she would not argue. She would provide only the notice and the attached exhibits. If pressed for opinion, she would refer all questions to legal. Her words would be short and kind and final. She repeated the 3 phrases we train into muscle memory. I hear you. I am providing the documents. Further questions go to legal. Her voice was calm. I thanked her for taking care of the house. Next came internal communications. Karen drafted a 1-page guide for staff and vendors. It explained that an official notice would be delivered on Monday morning and that operations would remain professional and quiet. It reminded everyone to keep personal views off social media and to route any media inquiry to the designated legal intake channel. We do not publish addresses. We describe the channel and the role. Legal will triage and respond as required. That is enough. We built the logistics around the clock. Certified mail labels printed and checked against the contract contacts. Electronic copies staged for morning sent to signatories and the billing contact. Vendor templates prepared but held until the client notice cleared. The file index was saved in 2 places and mirrored to our counsel. Karen made a floor note for the front desk so no one would be surprised by a courier. I called Ethan to confirm one last time. He picked me up from his office and asked if my hands were steady. They were. He reminded me that a clean record is stronger than a loud one. He asked if we had provided a path for the staff involved. I told him Olivia had the afternoon off and that Patricia had debriefed her and thanked her for holding the line with grace. Ethan said that matters more than people think. He wished us a quiet Monday. By late morning, the letter was ready for ink. I moved it to the head of the table and stood for a moment. I thought of the hillside at Caldera Ridge, of the stone that holds the heat of a September sun, of the way the ballroom windows catch late light and turn it almost human. Then I signed. My name in the blue pen where the owner's signature belongs. Karen added the date. The room stayed ordinary, the clock kept time, and that was exactly right. We sealed the physical packets. Each carried the notice, the exhibits, and a simple cover sheet that said, "Attached, please find." No adjectives. No apology. Precision stands on its own. Karen stacked them by the door for the morning courier. I created the digital bundle and saved it to the legal drive, then set the send time for 9 in the morning. The task list lost half its weight when the calendar clicked. Before lunch, I gathered the team leads in the small conference room. Patricia joined by video from the estate office, headset on, and hair pulled back like any event day. I repeated the guidance. No argument. Provide documents. Protect the brand and the people. If someone raises a voice, lower yours. If someone tries to force a meeting, decline and offer legal intake. Patricia nodded. The maintenance lead nodded. The catering lead asked if staff should answer questions from friends who work for vendors. Karen said keep it simple and kind and send them to their own managers. The rest was housekeeping. We synced vendor timelines so no one showed up early. We paused social posts for the estate for 48 hours. We placed a short note in the daily log so anyone covering a shift would understand the posture. I watered the lobby plants and checked the front door glass for fingerprints. Small order makes big order easier. When the building grew warm and the light turned soft, I walked the hallway once more. The red folder was back in the cabinet. The keys were on the hook. Karen shut down her screen and left with a wave that said, "See you at 8:45. I stayed 2 minutes longer and listened to the quiet click of the thermostat. Everything that could be ready was ready. The path from letter to delivery was marked. The people knew their lines. I locked the door and stepped into the clean September air. Monday started clean and cool. The office smelled like paper and lemon cleaner, and a little like resolve. Karen checked the queue and nodded once. Patricia texted from the estate office that the team was in position and the packet was staged. I watched the minute hand lean forward the way a diver leans before the water. At 9:03 in the morning, Patricia sent the notice. The subject line carried the event date and the word termination. The body stated that the agreement was ended for cause under Section 8.2 regarding morals and conduct and Section 9.1 regarding termination for cause. It referenced the brand policy and the documented incidents that damaged staff dignity and house standards. It stated that the deposit was agreed to liquidated damages under Section 5.4 and would be retained. The attachments followed in quiet order: incident report, system logs, screenshots, seating chart with edit trail, policy page, excerpts of the relevant clauses, a copy of the agreement with initials dated June 7. On my screen, the delivery confirmations began to land. To Daniel, to Ava, to the billing contact. Certified mail labels were already on their way by courier. Karen exhaled and set a block on the calendar titled Intake. The first call reached Patricia within 3 minutes. Ava's voice broke on the greeting. Patricia kept her own voice low and steady. She said she heard the concern. She said the documents provided the reasons and the sections. She said further questions should go to the legal intake channel. She did not argue. She did not explain beyond the record. Daniel called next. His sentences came hard and fast. Patricia repeated the same 3 lines. I hear you. I am providing the documents. Further questions go to legal. He demanded to see the owner today. Patricia stated that all communications would proceed through the channel identified in the notice. He asked who the owner was. She did not answer. She reminded him that the contract speaks for itself. Karen watched the log and marked each contact. She routed 2 voicemails to the legal drive. She kept a list of questions that were really statements. This is unfair. This is personal. This is a misunderstanding. We let the list sit without reply. The file would carry the weight. By 9:27, the parent numbers began to flash. Margaret left a long message that used the word optics twice and the word devastation 3 times. Charles called to suggest a temporary hold. Patricia provided the notice again and declined any meeting that was not scheduled through council. She did not change pace. She did not change tone. A text from the planner arrived at the estate office. Rachel said she had received the client's notice and wanted to know how to advise on next steps. Patricia thanked her and said the estate would contact vendors after the client noticed the window. Rachel replied with a single word understood. I watched the dot blink and go still. At 10, Karen sent the vendor template to our list. The message was short and plain. The venue agreement for the Pierce Harrington event scheduled for late September has been terminated for cause by client conduct per section cited. The client has been notified. Any coordination changes should be directed to the client. Our team will remain professional and available for questions about access to retrieve items left on site. There were no adjectives. Vendors prefer nouns. On the other end of town, in a kitchen with marble counters and a view chosen for its status, Ava began to cry in a way that turns a person small. I know this because a minute later, Margaret called again and said her daughter was inconsolable. She asked what could be done to make this go away. Patricia repeated the path. The path was narrow and written down. Daniel tried a different door. He called the front desk and asked the receptionist to patch him through to the person who signed checks. The receptionist read the floor note and transferred him to legal intake. He hung up. He called back. She did the same. The practice of small procedures held like a seam. Near 11, a message pinged from an unknown number to the estate line. The sender said the family would be arriving shortly to speak in person. Patricia replied that the house was not available for unscheduled meetings and that security would welcome only those with appointments. She attached the notice again. The reply came with a promise to bring their lawyer. Patricia responded that counsel could contact our counsel through the intake channel. She closed the thread. She went to check the ballroom floor for scuffs that did not exist. I remained at my office window and watched a towpath runner move like a metronome along the river. There is a point in any hard day where your body offers you the old choices. Explode or stand. I stood. The quiet around me was not empty. It was full of every step that brought us here. At noon, Karen brought in 2 sandwiches and a list of the day's calls. Her handwriting was neat, even when people were not. She pointed to the line about the deposit. $26,000 retained as liquidated damages under Section 5.4. She had highlighted the initials. She had written the date, June 7, in the margin as proof the parties knew what they were signing. I nodded and set the list aside. Money was only one part of a lesson. Just after 1, the estate phone rang again. Daniel asked to speak to the owner as a matter of family courtesy. Patricia kept her tone level. She said she was not authorized to discuss ownership and that all questions must go through legal. He asked if the owner knew what this was doing to his fiancée. Patricia said the owner was aware of the contents of the file. She did not add anything else. By mid-afternoon, the waves had shortened. People get tired of shouting when there is no echo. The notice sat in inboxes that had been loud last week and were quiet now. The certified packets would land tomorrow morning with their steady weight. The sun moved across the carpet and climbed the opposite wall. The house at the estate breathed the way old houses do when the windows are clean and the staff is respected. I shut my laptop and let the room settle. The day had bent, but not broken. The decision had been made. Somewhere across town, my brother was learning the difference between spectacle and consequence. It is a slow lesson and a sure one. The quiet teaches it best. The bronze plaque by the lobby door caught the afternoon light and steadied the room in a way the people could not. Karen stood at reception with the visitor log open. 3:15. My brother arrived first, shoulders squared like a man preparing to move a wall. The bride followed, eyes bright from crying. Her parents came next, dressed for control more than comfort. I greeted them with the voice I use for vendors and inspectors. Welcome. Please have a seat. We took the small conference room that faces the river. No projector, no screen, just a table, 4 chairs, and a carafe of water. I set 3 folders in the center and kept my hands still. The first held the operating agreement of Mitchell Properties, Inc., softened at the edges from years of being proof when rumor tried to act like fact. The second held the deed for Caldera Ridge Estate. The third held 3 representative files to show capacity, not inventory. Silence held for a long breath. The bride's mother clocked the walls, then the plaque she had passed. The letters were not new, only louder. My brother looked from the folders to my face like rearranging facts might change them. I began with the only point that mattered. We received your messages. You have the notice. We will not be debating it. I slid the operating agreement forward with the signature page up. Names, dates, ownership manager designation. No commentary. Then the deed. Legal description. Recording information. Purchase date. The bride pulled in a breath with nowhere to set it down. I opened the third folder and let the tabs speak. Elm Street Fourplex with rent roll and reserve balance. Maple Avenue Commercial with lease abstract and maintenance logs. Riverside Warehouse with the refinance close sheet that paid off early on disciplined cash flow. No totals. No parade. Proof does not need one. The bride tried an apology that did not know its target. She said she was sorry for the misunderstanding. She said emotions got the best of everyone. She said staff must have misread the moment. I listened until the words circled back on themselves, then shook my head once. Respect is not a style choice. It is a rule in this house. I tapped the brand policy under the deed. She looked down, then away. Her father leaned forward like a man closing a deal too late in the day. He said there was a way to restore goodwill. He named an amount to save appearances, $50,000 to make the problem disappear. The number sat on the table like a heavy thing that did not belong. I let it sit, then moved it aside without touching it. We do not sell our standards. The staff on that hill earn their dignity every shift. The house keeps its name by keeping its word. Money does not revise either one. My brother watched my face the way he used to watch coaches when he wanted a call to change. He asked if there was anything he could say to make me reconsider. I thought of the long dinner table and the quiet cut of restroom flowers. I thought of Olivia lifting a tray with steady hands. I thought of Patricia writing names and times while keeping service smooth. I gave him the truth that belonged to all of it. You chose how to treat people. We chose how to protect them. The bride's mother asked for less than a reversal. Privacy. She said the town is unkind and the calendar unforgiving. She did not say the word face, but it stood in the room. I told her our team does not speak to the press. We route inquiries to legal. We will not release any statement beyond the notice. What others say will be their own measure. My brother's eyes went back to the deed, and then to the plaque he had walked past 100 times without seeing it. Recognition moved over him like a shadow. He had called me too poor for his perfect day and now sat in a room where my name matched the brass by the door. He did not offer excuses. For the first time in a long time, he did not offer anything. I closed the folders with care. I reminded them certified copies would arrive tomorrow and that further communication must go through counsel. I stood. Chairs whispered against the floor like a soft exit sign. The bride stared at the river and blinked hard. Her father set his hands on the table and lifted them again as if searching for a lever that was not there. Her mother thanked me for the meeting with a voice that had lost its shine. We walked out through the lobby. The bronze plaque did not change. It never does. It sees seasons' hands and small storms of human weather and remains itself. My brother stopped in front of it and read every letter like a new language. Then he nodded once the smallest bow a person makes to what they finally understand and followed his almost family into the bright September afternoon. By evening, the town started doing what towns do. Calendars shifted. People called people. The first ripple came from the River Mill Bistro, where the after-party had been penciled in. Their manager left a message for the couple that the reservation was contingent on a main venue within city limits, and that without it, the late-night service could not proceed. I heard later that he offered a buyout of the small bar room if they could confirm a new site by the end of the week. No one could. The church on Maple called Rachel before sunset. The sanctuary was booked for a harvest concert and could not hold a reception, but the fellowship hall in the basement was open on the date. Folding chairs, sheet cakes, a faithful space that smells like coffee and lemon oil. The pastor's assistant said they would do their best if needed. Rachel thanked her and asked for a hold. The notice board in the hallway would read tentative until someone brought certainty, and certainty was the one thing missing. By morning, the sound company weighed in. Their owner sent a short note that a new location would require a fresh contract, a site survey, and a rush fee that doubled their crew rate for the week. He was polite. He was also a man with trucks to schedule and workers to pay. He could not anchor his payroll to a plan that kept slipping. Guests began to back away in small and ordinary ways. An aunt wrote that her flight credit could not be moved again. A college friend said her sitter could not stay past 10 in a church hall. Someone had a medical procedure that would not budge. The QR code for RSVPs showed numbers that had felt solid last week and now looked like ice in a glass left on a porch. No one blamed anyone in public. People simply adjust their lives the way they do when a date stops being strong. At midday, I stopped into Tom Sanders' place for a sandwich to take back to the office. Tom keeps a small room with old license plates on the wall and a chalkboard that lists the specials. The lunch crowd was a handful of contractors and a teacher on planning period who still wore her lanyard. The talk had that careful tone men use when they are trying to keep a story between the lines. A DJ said this was a reminder never to be rude at a walkthrough. A caterer nodded and said venues remember. Someone at the end of the bar said the phrase that sticks in trades because it is true. Do not disrespect the house that holds your day. No names, no moral sermons, only the kind of lesson that moves quietly through people who work weekends so joy can look easy. I paid and waited while Tom wrapped the sandwich in butcher paper. He glanced at me in the way old friends do when they know a storm line and see you standing on the dry side. He did not ask for details. He slid a bottle of water across and said, "Take care." I told him the same. Back at the office, Karen had compiled what she called the domino list. After the party, the venue. Church hall on hold. The sound company requires a new contract with surge pricing. The photo team asked for a scouting call because church basements have ceilings that fight light. The transportation vendor needed a new map because the valet was out if the site moved. She had added a column for guest updates that read RSVPs declining due to conflicts. It was not gloating. It was logistics. I walked the hall to the window and watched the river move like a person keeping promises. Somewhere on the other side of town, my brother stayed out of the gym and the grocery store, where men talk at the deli counter with the quiet efficiency of people who have solved louder problems. He would feel the air change before anyone said anything to his face. That is how consequence works in a place like this. It does not need a headline to be real. Ava went quiet online. The last post sat there in its careful light and matched plates, and then nothing. Her friends shifted to private messages with kind questions and no easy answers. I did not read them, but I could imagine the rhythm. Are you okay? Can I help? Do you want me to ask around? The answers take time to learn. In the late afternoon, the church called again and said the fellowship hall could hold 100 if they did not mind the piano in the corner. The assistant said she could pull the quilted dividers from storage to make the room feel full if the guest count fell. She sounded like someone who had seen grief in many sizes and knew how to soften a hard day. I thanked her for her kindness in my own head and went back to my desk. The sound company sent over a new quote with a number that would make anyone swallow. The line items were clean. Additional crew. New power runs. Emergency generator rental because small halls trip breakers when bands get happy. It was not punishment. It was math. By evening, Tom's chalkboard had a new item that made the regulars laugh. Wedding soup. No extra charge for schedule changes. It was not a jab. It was the way this town lets steam out of a pipe so the system does not rattle. I locked the office as the sky turned the color of a bruise that is healing. The street smelled like rain without rain. I thought of Olivia's small hands lifting plates, and Patricia's steady voice saying, "I hear you, here are the documents. Further questions go to legal." Karma is a word people use when they want the world to feel balanced. What I saw this week had another name. It was the weight of choices settling into place. It was the calendar moving around the truth. It was the sound of a plan rebuilding itself without spectacle. A week later, the afternoon light fell soft across my desk when the front bell chimed once. Karen looked in and said, "He is alone." I told her to give us the room and to hold all calls for the next hour. When Daniel stepped through the doorway, he looked like a man who had walked a long way without deciding where he was going. We sat at the small round table by the window. No folders at first, no posturing. The river moved the way rivers do when people are quiet. I waited until his shoulders dropped from their defensive height. Then I opened my laptop and brought up a plain timeline I keep for myself when days feel fogged and I need the bones of the story. I pointed to the first line. In 2015, I bought the Willow Street duplex for $210,000. I lived in the small unit with a mattress on the floor and patchy paint and paid a plumber in cash I had saved from years of side work. I rented the other unit to a nurse who worked nights and paid early every month. I learned to fix things that broke at inconvenient hours and to sleep between phone calls. The next line read, 2016 to 2017, to stabilize and improve. New gutters. New windows bought in a discount lot and hauled home in a borrowed truck. Rents adjusted when value was real and not a wish. Then a sale and a 1031 exchange into a 4-unit on Elm where the numbers worked without wincing. In 2018, I moved into the spare bedroom of my own life and bought the Maple Avenue commercial with a long lease to a hardware store that still knows what a bolt bin is for. The roof tried to fail that winter. We replaced it in March. By summer, the reserve account looked like quiet strength. I clicked forward to the hard year. In 2019, probate opened after Mom died. The will was tilted. More to you, less to me. I did not contest it. The attorney said I had grounds. I did not want to make our grief a courtroom sport. I kept the peace because I believed we could not survive a second fracture. I kept working instead. His eyes lifted, then dropped. He pressed his hand flat on the table like he needed a surface to talk to. He said he had been favored since we were kids, and he had called it normal. He said that feeling like the chosen one had made him blind to the cost other people paid for his comfort. He swallowed and tried again. He only said these words in a low voice, I forgot to respect you. I let the sentence sit between us until it grew its own legs. Then I nodded. I scrolled to 2020 through 2022. Those years were the hills. The estate needed everything, and I gave it what I had. The restoration budget said $2.5 million, and I made every dollar show its work. Stone repair, window restoration, mechanical systems, gardens. Revived in sections so the soil would not revolt. Patricia came on then and built a team that treats strangers like welcomed guests and staff like the heart of the place. The last line on the file read 2023 portfolio consolidated and quiet. I told him why I keep records close. Peace is louder when you protect it. People are kinder when they think you need their kindness. I chose a modest house and a simple car because the work asks for concentration and not applause. I did not hide to shame anyone. I hid to build without interruption. He looked at the screen, then at me. He said he had used the word poor like a weapon and had dressed it in a joke. He said he had inherited a belief that the loudest room decides what a person is worth, and he had never questioned it. He said he had loved me in the lazy way brothers do when they assume love can survive anything they throw at it. I closed the laptop and folded my hands. I told him I do not hold a grudge because grudges take both hands and I need mine for work. I told him I do not forget because forgetting removes the guardrails we need to drive home safe. I told him respect is the price of admission to the rest of our lives. If we cannot afford that, we cannot afford each other. He nodded and said that he would show it and not sell it. He asked what that looked like in a week and not a year. I said it looked like small things done on time. It looked like calling before dropping by. It looked like speaking to people as if they were in the room. It looked like paying vendors when you say you will and treating staff as if your mother were watching. He sat back and breathed through his nose the way he used to before a game in high school. He said Ava needed space to think, and he did too. He said he had made a mess he could not mop with money. He said he was going to tell the church to release the hall and the sound company to stand down. He said he would move the date far enough into the future that no one had to scramble. We stood at the same time without planning it. He held out his hand. I took it. No grand speech. No photograph in a silver frame. He looked older in a good way, like wood that has been sanded until the grain tells the truth. At the door, he paused. He said he knew there would be days when he would want me to forget and move on faster, and that I would not. He said he would try to remember that the speed of repair belongs to the person who was cut. I said that sounded like respect for learning to speak. When he walked away down the hallway, the quiet did not feel like emptiness. It felt like a room being measured for new furniture. I went back to my desk and opened my notebook to write a single sentence. The past holds its place. The future asks for proof. October came in with a thin blue sky and a kind of practical mercy. The phone stayed busy, but in a normal way. On the first Tuesday, Rachel walked the terrace with Patricia and sketched 2 spring ceremonies with a pencil she keeps tucked behind her ear. She said our process had the thing clients look for when they are spending real money. It was not chandeliers. It was predictable. She signed a renewal for her agency block on the hood of her car because the sun felt warm enough to make paper feel like a good idea. Patricia ran the calendar like a conductor. She did not swell. She set the tempo. I moved her signature from manager to director in the operations binder and told her what the raise would be when the quarter closed. She answered the way she answers on busy Saturdays. Copy. Then she walked the south lawn and made a note about frost blankets for the new rose beds. The crew started calling her by her first name less and by ma'am more. Respect likes the sound of earned. Vendors kept choosing the quiet middle path. The rental company delivered early and took photos of their own placement so breakdown could be fast and clean. The photo team added a line to their intake form that asked whether anyone had sensitivities we should know before group shots. The florist started labeling crates for the fellowship hall because the church needed the room flipped by 8 on Wednesdays for choir. None of it was gossip. It was people doing what work asks when drama tries to set the schedule. Daniel and Ava moved their date to the last Saturday of October and tucked the reception into the church hall that smells like coffee and white paint. The layout showed long tables dressed in plastic to match the budget. A family friend baked sheet cakes with perfect corners. The pianist in the side room knew every hymn key. I did not go. I walked the ridge at Caldera and listened to the dry leaves make their small applause under my shoes. Somewhere across town, a couple tried to make a new shape out of an old plan. That is a kind of courage, too. Ava stayed off her feeds. No statement, no crafted paragraph. Silence is also a choice. The town did not cheer, and it did not jeer. People folded sweaters and raked their yards and took one deep breath before turning on the heat for the first time. At Tom's place, the chalkboard went back to listing chili and ham on rye. The joke from last month faded the way chalk always does when the board gets wiped at night. Mid-October brought a storm that knocked the power out at the estate for 2 hours. Patricia rolled to the generator plan like it was a drill she had practiced in her sleep. Candles were placed where they made sense and not where they looked pretty. The couple whose rehearsal dinner was on site kept laughing in the dark and later sent a note that said the candles made it feel like a story their grandchildren would love. Patricia forwarded the note to the team with 2 words. Good work. Rachel sent 4 more holds by Halloween. She said her clients were reassured by the way we handled a hard month without theatrics. She told me the thing she valued most was that our no sounded the same as our yes. It meant her planning notes stayed true when budgets or families shifted. We put her card in the welcome packet for winter tours and put her on the short list for vendor showcases. People who choose steady deserve steady back. In November, the maples at Caldera Ridge went to copper and then to bare. I walked the garden path early on a Saturday and watched my breath make a fog that disappeared fast. The fountains kept their thin lip of ice near the edges where the sun had not reached. Peace is not a cheer. It is a chair pulled out for you at a table that used to have no place card. I stood where the ceremonial lawn drops to the lake and thought about how a line once set in the right place will hold through the weather. Daniel came by twice to carry speakers for a charity auction. He did not talk about the wedding. He lifted what needed lifting and asked Patricia where she wanted it. He said please, and he said thank you, and he watched the staff the way a person looks when he is trying to learn a language by ear. That mattered more than any paragraph. There were small kindnesses on both sides of the hill. The church called Patricia to borrow stands for poinsettias and returned them wrapped in brown paper with a handwritten note. Karen brought cinnamon rolls one morning and cut them into 4 so no one had to pretend about diets. A groundskeeper left a basket of windfall apples on the back steps with a scribble that said, "Pie if you want it." I brought the apples home and baked and left 2 slices in the staff fridge under foil. Nobody put their name on them. They disappeared in the way good things should. By the week before Thanksgiving, the calendar had the shape of a place that knows itself. Rachel had a stack of signed agreements. Patricia had a team that moved like water over stones. Daniel and Ava had a photograph in a frame on a small table somewhere that would always hold more than it showed. I stood under the last tree, still holding color, and let the afternoon lay its hand on my shoulder. No gloating rose up, only a quiet relief that the boundary now matched the land. Respect had picked a side, and it was the side of work done well people treated right, and a house that keeps its name. The second Sunday of December came with frost on the river grass, and the kind of bright sun that makes cold look almost forgiving. Cedar Falls Church filled slowly, the choir in green scarves, the sanctuary smelling like pine and beeswax. I slipped into a pew along the side aisle and let the familiar carols do their work. People nodded to one another with the quiet of a season that asks for softness. Halfway through the service, I saw Daniel step in at the back and stand until he found me. He did not make a path down the center where eyes live. He came along the side and sat with space between us, the respectful kind hands folded, head bowed when the congregation bowed. When the final hymn faded and the benediction sent us into winter light, he stayed seated until the aisle cleared. Then he moved into the empty space beside me. He spoke without decoration. He said he had been wrong. He said he was sorry. He did not reach for reasons. He did not pull in anyone else's name to spread the weight. He said the words like a person placing something heavy on the floor so it would not break. I thanked him for being direct. I told him that apology is a door and that it opens best when it is not crowded with furniture. I reminded him of the boundary we had agreed to in quieter hours. Respect is the condition for any step forward. If we keep that line clear, we will know where our feet belong. He nodded and said he had learned more in 3 months of silence than in years of being cheered. He said that choosing the small church hall had loosened something in him, that he had looked around at folding chairs and sheet cake and felt for the first time in a long time like a person instead of a poster. He said Ava was still quiet, and that he was letting quiet be what it needed to be, not a lever to make me move faster. We stood and let people pass. An usher wished us peace. Children filed past with paper crowns and candy canes, a small procession that never fails to remind a body that life is meant to be simple more often than we allow. We walked to the fellowship hall where coffee lived in large silver urns and cookies sat on paper plates. He poured 2 cups and handed one to me without asking how I would take it, which is the only correct way to hand someone coffee in a church basement. He said he had told the men at the gym that he would not be talking about the estate or the notice or the lost deposit, that family business would stay where family business belongs. He said he had called the sound company to thank them for their time, even though the date had passed, and that he had paid a small fee. He did not have to pay because he had learned that dignity is not only what you expect from others, it is what you choose to practice when no one is grading you. I told him I had seen him carry speakers for a charity event, and that staff had noticed he said please, and he said thank you. I told him that trust is built in plain view and also in the back hall where nobody claps. I told him I do not plan to forget, and I do not plan to rehearse the hurt. Memory will keep guard. Work will keep time. We stepped outside into sunlight that bounced off a thin crust of snow along the hedges. He said he would not ask me to speed up the clock. He said he would be where he said he would be, and would pay who he said he would pay, and would speak of me as if I were standing beside him. I said that sounded like a future that could carry its own weight. He took a breath and seemed taller by a fraction, the way a person looks after setting down what he has carried too long. We said goodbye without ceremony and walked in different directions, which is sometimes the best way to protect a new agreement. I crossed the street toward the parking lot and felt the sun on my face for 1 clean minute. The choir had spilled out onto the steps and started an old carol again. Voices thin in the cold and kind in the way only December voices are. Justice did not arrive like a drumline. It came the way truth usually comes when you finally clear a table and leave room for it to sit. A boundary was drawn and kept. Consequences were accepted without speech-making. An apology was given in a space with no cameras and no crowd. That was enough. If you have ever been made to feel small, hold on to your records, and your calm set the line where your dignity lives, and trust the worth you know, even when others cannot see it yet. Tell me where you are listening from and share the moment you chose yourself. If this story felt like company on a hard day, stay close for the next one. We will keep the light on. Dignity is not for sale.